Hello everyone, and welcome to my General Hospital official channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up.
The air in the Tracy Quartermain's private sitting room at the Quartermain mansion was thick with the scent of old money and fresh-cut lilies. It was a space that spoke of generations of influence, a curated museum of her family's triumphs. Tracy herself, perched on the edge of a silk-upholstered chaise lounge, felt a rare and profound sense of contentment. It was a feeling so foreign it was almost unnerving, like a forgotten melody suddenly remembered. This peace, this fragile happiness, had a name: Ronnie. Ronnie, with his kind eyes and calloused hands, a man who seemed to have wandered into her world of corporate takeovers and familial backstabbing from a simpler, more honest place. He wasn't like the fortune hunters and sycophants who usually orbited the Quartermain sphere. He was a contractor, a man who built things with wood and stone, who spoke plainly and listened intently. He had been restoring the library's mahogany paneling, a project Tracy had initially micromanaged with her characteristic ferocity. But somewhere between debates about wood stains and the quiet admiration in his gaze, her defenses had crumbled. He saw her, not as the formidable Tracy Quartermain, heiress and corporate shark, but as a woman. A woman who was lonely, who was witty, who loved terrible reality television and had a secret soft spot for mint chocolate chip ice cream. He brought her coffee in a simple ceramic mug, not the family's fine bone china, and he never flinched when her sharp tongue lashed out. He'd simply smile, a slow, warm smile that seemed to smooth the frayed edges of her soul. "You're miles away," his voice, a gentle baritone, pulled her from her reverie. He stood in the doorway, holding 2 glasses of iced tea. He was a handsome man, with silver just beginning to thread through his dark hair and laugh lines that spoke of a life spent smiling. "Just thinking," Tracy said, accepting the glass. Her fingers brushed against his, and a familiar, pleasant warmth spread through her. "The paneling is coming along beautifully. You're an artist." "It's just wood, Tracy," he said, sitting beside her. "It's your vision that's making it beautiful." That was another thing about him. He was generous with his praise, never seeking to aggrandize himself. It was so refreshingly different from the constant posturing she was accustomed to. For months, she had lived in a bubble of newfound affection. She, Tracy Quartermain, who had armored her heart after a lifetime of disappointments, had let someone in. She had shared stories about her son, Ned, her frustrations with her brother, Michael, and even her complicated, grief-stricken memories of her late father, Edward. Ronnie had been the perfect confidant, sympathetic, understanding, and endlessly supportive. "I have to run into the office for a few hours," Tracy said, finishing her tea. "There's a merger proposal that Michael is bound to bungle if I'm not there to oversee the details." Ronnie took her hand. "Don't let them get to you. You're the strongest person I know. They're lucky to have you." He leaned in and kissed her, a soft, lingering kiss that felt like a promise. Tracy left the mansion feeling lighter than she had in years, the ghost of his kiss on her lips a talisman against the corporate battles to come. The office at ELQ was its usual hive of controlled chaos. The proposed merger with a European agricultural conglomerate was a delicate one, fraught with potential pitfalls and hidden clauses. Tracy, with her razor-sharp mind, was the only one who could navigate its complexities. She was buried in financial projections when her assistant buzzed in. "Ms. Quartermain, a Detective Rodriguez is here to see you. He says it's urgent." Tracy frowned. "The police?" Her mind immediately flew to her family, Ned, Brooklyn, the baby. A cold dread seized her heart. "Send him in." Detective Rodriguez was a serious man with a weary expression and a folder tucked under his arm. "Ms. Quartermain, thank you for your time. This is a somewhat unusual matter. It pertains to an individual you may be acquainted with." He opened the folder and slid a photograph across her desk. It was a grainy surveillance image, but the face was unmistakable. Ronnie. He was wearing a baseball cap and a jacket she'd never seen him in, but it was him. He was standing at a bank teller's window. "What is this?" Tracy asked, her voice colder than she intended. "Why are you showing me a picture of a friend?" His name isn't Ronnie Shields, Ms. Quartermain, Rodriguez said, his tone flat and factual. We believe his real name is Ronald Jacobs. He's a con man wanted in 3 states for grand larceny, fraud, and forgery. His modus operandi is to insinuate himself into the lives of wealthy, often lonely, individuals, gain their trust, and then systematically drain their assets. The words hit Tracy like a series of physical blows. Con man. Wanted. Grand larceny. They echoed in the hollowing chamber of her mind. She felt the solid floor of her reality begin to crack and splinter. That's impossible, she whispered, her throat tight. You have the wrong man. Ronnie is a contractor. He's restoring my home. We have fingerprints from an arrest in Florida 10 years ago that match the ones we lifted from a glass at the coffee shop he frequents, the detective continued, relentless. He's very good. He establishes a false identity, gets work in the homes of his targets, and plays the part of the honest, salt-of-the-earth laborer. It's a persona that lowers defenses. Tracy's mind was racing, a frantic, desperate scramble to find a flaw in the detective's story. But the pieces were beginning to fall into place with a horrifying, sickening clarity. The way he'd always been so curious about the family business, asking seemingly innocent questions about security systems, offshore accounts, and the location of her late mother's jewelry. She had thought he was just taking an interest in her life. Now, she saw it for what it was, reconnaissance. What does he do? She managed to ask, her voice a strained thread of sound. Once he has full access and trust, he forges documents, power of attorney, deeds. He's known for being patient. He'll spend months, sometimes over a year, building the relationship. In your case, Ms. Quartermain, given the scale of your assets, he was likely playing a very long game. We have reason to believe he was in the final stages of preparation. The detective slid another document across the desk. It was a copy of a notarized form, granting one Ronnie Shields limited power of attorney for the purposes of managing the restoration project at the Quartermain estate. The signature was hers. It looked exactly like her signature. But she had never signed it. She remembered him bringing her a stack of insurance waivers and liability forms for the workers a few weeks ago. She'd signed them without a second thought, too distracted by the warmth of his hand on her shoulder. Oh, my God, she breathed. The room began to tilt. The portrait of her father on the far wall seemed to be staring at her with a mixture of pity and scorn. You were always a fool for a pretty face, Tracy, she could almost hear him say. We're moving to apprehend him now, Detective Rodriguez said, gathering the photographs. We wanted to inform you first, as you are the primary target. We'll need your full cooperation. We have officers positioned around the mansion. Tracy didn't hear the rest. A high-pitched whine was filling her ears, drowning out his words. The image of Ronald Jacobs, flashed in her mind. His smile, his touch, the way he'd held her the night she'd cried over a fight with Ned, it was all a performance. A meticulously crafted, cold-blooded performance. Every tender word, every shared confidence, every moment of vulnerability she had offered him had been recorded, studied, and weaponized against her. She had let him see the parts of herself she hid from the world, the insecurity, the loneliness, the desperate need to be loved for who she was, not for her name or her fortune. And he had used it all as a blueprint for her destruction. The humiliation was a living thing, coiling in her gut, sharp and acidic. It was more painful than the betrayal itself. She, the great Tracy Quartermain, who prided herself on being able to spot a scam a mile away, had been utterly and completely duped. Ms. Quartermain? Are you all right? The detective's voice sounded distant, muffled. She stood up, her legs feeling like water. I need to get some air. It's best if you stay here. We have the situation under control. But Tracy wasn't listening. She had to see it for herself. She had to look into the eyes of the man she thought she loved and see the lies staring back at her. She pushed past the detective and out of her office, ignoring the startled looks of her employees. The elevator ride down to the lobby was a blur of reflective metal and her own pale, ghostly reflection. She didn't wait for her driver. She hailed a cab, her movements jerky and automatic. The ride to the Quartermain mansion was a silent, nightmarish journey. The familiar streets of Port Charles seemed alien and menacing. Every happy couple on the sidewalk was a mockery. Every memory of the last few months played in her mind on a cruel, endless loop, now recontextualized with sinister intent. The picnic he'd planned? A chance to ensure she was away from the house so he could do, what? Plant listening devices? Copy financial documents? The time he'd fixed her personal laptop? A cold sweat broke out on her brow. He'd had access to everything. The cab pulled up to the wrought iron gates of the mansion. Everything looked the same, the manicured lawns, the stately facade. But it felt like a stage set now, the scene of her imminent public shaming. She saw the unmarked police cars parked discreetly down the street. The trap was set. With a deep, shuddering breath that did nothing to calm the frantic beating of her heart, she walked up the steps and through the front door. The grand foyer was silent. She could hear the soft sound of sanding coming from the library. His domain. She walked toward the double doors, her heels sinking soundlessly into the priceless Persian rug. She pushed the door open. He was there, his back to her, focused on smoothing the edge of a panel. The room was filled with the sweet, dusty smell of sawdust. He was whistling a tune she recognized, a song they'd heard together at a little jazz club a month ago. The memory was a knife twisting in her chest. "Tracy," he said, turning around, his face breaking into that easy, genuine smile that had become the center of her world. "I thought you'd be at the office for hours. Did you miss me?" He started to walk toward her, wiping his hands on a rag. The familiarity of the gesture, the sheer normalcy of it, was unbearable. "Don't," she said, her voice a cracked whisper. His smile faltered. "Don't what? What's wrong, honey? Did something happen at ELQ? Did Michael say something to upset you?" The concern in his voice was so perfectly calibrated, so believable. He was still in character, giving the performance of his life. And why wouldn't he? He didn't know the curtain was about to fall. "Your name," Tracy said, forcing the words out. "Is it Ronald Jacobs?" The change was instantaneous and terrifying. It wasn't a dramatic transformation. He didn't snarl or flee. The warmth simply drained from his eyes, leaving behind a flat, calculating coldness. The affable slouch of his shoulders straightened into a posture of readiness. The mask had not just slipped, it had shattered, revealing the hollow, predatory man beneath. The man she had never seen, the man who had been watching her all along. "I see," he said, his voice now devoid of all its previous warmth. It was neutral, businesslike. "So, the jig is up." Pity. "We were so close to the finish line." The confirmation, delivered with such casual cruelty, was more devastating than the detective's folder full of evidence. To hear it from his own mouth, it stole the air from her lungs. "Close to what?" she choked out. "What was the finish line? Emptying my bank accounts? Stealing my home? Selling my family's secrets?" He gave a slight, indifferent shrug. "The usual portfolio." The power of attorney documents were already in place. The forgeries on the offshore trust transfers were nearly flawless. Another week, maybe two, and I'd have been on a beach in Bali, and you'd have been left with a mountain of debt and a lot of very uncomfortable questions. He looked around the library, a faint smirk on his lips. "It really is a beautiful house." "A shame." Every word was another lash, stripping away her dignity, her pride, her very sense of self. The love she had felt for him curdled in her veins, transforming into a pure, undiluted agony. "How could you?" The question was a plea, torn from the deepest, most wounded part of her soul. "Everything I told you, everything we shared. Was any of it real?" For a fleeting second, something flickered in his cold eyes. Not remorse, but perhaps a hint of professional assessment. "You were a mark, Tracy." A very lucrative, surprisingly lonely mark. The sharing was part of the job. It's called building rapport. You, of all people, should understand that. It's just business. Just business. The Quartermaine mantra. The very principle she had lived by her entire life used to eviscerate her. He had beaten her at her own game, and he had used her heart as the playing field. The world seemed to slow down, the edges of her vision darkening as if the library were being consumed by a creeping shadow. She could hear the blood roaring in her ears, a tidal wave of shame and despair. She saw his face, not as the loving partner she had adored, but as the stranger he truly was, a stranger who had mapped her weaknesses with the precision of a master strategist. She thought of the nights she had spent lying in his arms, feeling safer than she had in decades. She thought of the way he'd remembered her birthday with a simple, hand-carved bird because she'd once mentioned she loved watching them from her window. She thought of the future they had tentatively, joyfully begun to plan. A future that had never existed, a fantasy constructed in a prison of lies. The weight of it all, the betrayal, the humiliation, the utter annihilation of her trust, came crashing down upon her. It was a physical pressure on her chest, crushing, suffocating. The day at the Quartermaine mansion began as any other, tense, loud, and filled with family chaos. Tracy Quartermaine was in her usual fiery mood, commanding the household staff to prepare for an unexpected visitor. "If Ronnie thinks he can just waltz into my home unannounced, he has another thing coming," she snapped, her voice echoing through the grand foyer. Monica, sipping coffee at the breakfast table, didn't even flinch. "Tracy, you're acting like this man's a villain. From what I heard, he's charming and, dare I say, interesting." Tracy rolled her eyes, her diamond bracelet glittering as she waved dismissively. "Charming is just another word for manipulative, Monica. You'd think by now we'd all have learned that lesson." Down the hall, Brooklyn listened in, a frown forming on her face. She'd grown fond of Ronnie over the past few weeks. The man had a quiet confidence, and he'd managed to make her laugh even during her worst days. But Tracy's instincts were rarely wrong, and something about her tone made Brooke uneasy. "Maybe Grandma's right," she muttered under her breath. "Maybe Ronnie's not who he says he is." When the doorbell finally rang, Tracy straightened her blazer, her posture sharp, commanding. She glanced toward the butler. "Show him in. Let's get this over with." Ronnie stepped inside, his usual calm demeanor slightly unsettled by the tension in the room. He offered a polite smile, his blue eyes darting toward Tracy. "Good morning, Mrs. Quartermaine. You look radiant as always." Tracy's lips twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. "Flattery, mister, whatever your last name is this week, won't get you far in this house." Ronnie chuckled softly. "Still as direct as ever. I like that." Monica coughed quietly to break the awkward silence. "Ronnie, you mentioned you had something to discuss, something important?" Ronnie's expression shifted, the charm fading from his eyes, replaced by a quiet seriousness. He turned toward Tracy. "Actually, this concerns you. There's something you need to know. Something about who I am." Brooklyn, sensing the tension, stepped closer. "Ronnie, what are you talking about? You're scaring me." Tracy crossed her arms. "Oh, for heaven's sake, just spit it out." Ronnie hesitated, his hands trembling slightly. "Tracy, I wasn't entirely honest about where I come from or why I came to Port Charles." The room went still. Even the ticking of the antique clock seemed louder. Tracy narrowed her gaze. "I knew it. I knew there was something off about you. What is it this time? Are you after the family fortune? ELQ shares? Or maybe you're another one of Luke's old drinking buddies here to stir up ghosts?" Ronnie took a deep breath. "No, Tracy. It's much deeper than that. You see, I'm not just some man passing through. I'm connected to you." Brooklyn frowned. "Connected how?" Ronnie looked her dead in the eye, his voice low but firm. "Tracy, I'm your son." The words hit the room like a bomb. Monica gasped audibly, dropping her coffee cup. Brooklyn's jaw dropped. What did you just say?" Tracy blinked rapidly, her face draining of color. My, what? Ronnie stepped closer, his expression filled with both fear and hope. Your son. You gave birth to me, Tracy. Years ago. Before you married Mitch, before you ever met Luke. You were young, reckless, and your father, Edward, made sure no one ever found out. For a moment, Tracy didn't breathe. The world around her blurred, and 1,000 memories she'd buried decades ago clawed their way to the surface. She remembered the cold hospital room, the way her father's lawyer had handled everything, and how she'd been sent to Europe under the guise of business training. Her voice trembled. That's not possible. That was handled. Ronnie's tone softened. You mean covered up? He paid the family that adopted me. But I grew up hearing whispers, knowing I didn't belong. When I got older, I found the records sealed under Quartermain Enterprises. And then I saw your name. Monica covered her mouth. Oh my God. Tracy, is this true? Tracy couldn't speak. Her knees buckled slightly, and Brooke rushed forward, steadying her. Grandma, say something. Tracy shook her head, her eyes wide. I don't, this can't be happening. Ronnie stepped forward, his eyes pleading. I didn't come here to hurt you. I came to understand why you left me. I just wanted to know why I wasn't enough. Brooke's eyes welled with tears. Ronnie, this is insane. There must be some mistake. But Monica's instincts told her otherwise. She'd seen enough Quartermain secrets buried and unearthed to recognize the ring of truth in Ronnie's voice. Tracy, Monica whispered, if this is true, he deserves to know. Tracy opened her mouth to respond, but the room began to spin. Her hand clutched her chest, and before anyone could react, her body went limp. Grandma! Brooke screamed. Ronnie lunged forward, catching her before she hit the floor. Call 911. Monica ordered, already checking Tracy's pulse. Minutes later, chaos filled the mansion. The paramedics rushed in, and Ronnie stood frozen, his face pale. Brooke Lynn glared at him through tears. What did you do to her? She shouted. Ronnie shook his head, his voice breaking. I didn't mean for this to happen. I just wanted the truth. Monica put a hand on Brooke's shoulder. Enough. He didn't cause this. Shock did. The EMTs lifted Tracy onto a stretcher, and Brooke ran alongside, panic written all over her face. Ronnie followed at a distance, guilt consuming him. At General Hospital, chaos continued. Ned and Olivia arrived moments later, demanding answers. What the hell happened? Ned barked, pacing the waiting room. Monica took a deep breath. Tracy fainted. Her blood pressure spiked after some shocking news. Olivia frowned. What kind of shocking news? Monica hesitated, then looked toward Ronnie, who sat alone in the corner, staring at the floor. It's about him, she said quietly. Ned's gaze followed hers, narrowing. That guy? He's the reason my mother's in there? Monica nodded slightly. He says he's her son. Ned froze, the words taking a second to register. Her what? Olivia gasped. Wait, Tracy has another kid? How is that even possible? Brooke Lynn nodded, her eyes still red. He said Edward made her give him up. That it was all covered up before she married Dad. Ned rubbed his temples. Unbelievable. Only in this family could something like this happen. Monica sighed. You're telling me. Inside Tracy's hospital room, the monitors beeped softly. She stirred, her eyelids fluttering open. Where am I? She whispered weakly. Monica leaned over her. You're at General Hospital. You fainted. Tracy blinked, her memories flooding back in waves. Ronnie, she murmured. Monica nodded gently. He's here. He's been waiting outside since they brought you in. Tracy turned her head away, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. I can't face him. Not yet. Monica took her hand. You have to, Tracy. He deserves at least that. Outside, Ronnie sat in silence until the door creaked open. Brooklyn stepped out, her arms folded. She's awake, she said quietly. Ronnie stood, hesitant. Can I see her? Brooke's expression was conflicted. She's not ready. You dropped a bomb on her, Ronnie. You can't expect her to just welcome you with open arms. Ronnie nodded slowly. I know. But I can't walk away now. Not again. Brooke studied him, the pain in his eyes making it hard to stay angry. If what you said is true, you've both been through enough. But you need proof. This family's been lied to more times than I can count. Ronnie reached into his jacket and pulled out a worn envelope. I have proof. DNA results. Paperwork from the adoption agency. Edward's signature. Brooke's eyes widened. You're serious? Ronnie handed it to her. I didn't come here to con anyone. I came here to find where I belong. Brooke looked at the papers, her heart pounding. You'd better hope this checks out. Hours later, Ned stormed into the room holding the same papers. Monica, this is insane. It's legitimate. The signatures match. Edward paid off an adoption agency in 1971. Monica nodded grimly. Then he's telling the truth. Ned sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. So I have another brother. And Mom, she never said a word. Olivia placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. You can't blame her, Ned. You know how Edward was. He controlled everything. Later that evening, Tracy finally allowed Ronnie into her hospital room. The air was thick with tension as he stepped inside. You look better, he said softly. Tracy didn't look at him. I don't feel better. Silence lingered for a long time before she spoke again. You have no idea what that time in my life was like. I was barely 20. My father told me if I kept the baby, he'd disinherit me. I didn't have a choice. Ronnie's voice broke. You could have fought. Tracy turned to him, tears spilling freely now. You think I didn't want to? I held you in my arms for 1 hour before they took you away. 1 hour. And I've thought about you every day since. Ronnie swallowed hard, emotion tightening his throat. Then why didn't you find me? Tracy's eyes softened. Because I thought it would ruin your life. I thought you had a family who loved you. I couldn't take that from you. He shook his head. They never told me the truth. I grew up wondering who I was. Where I came from. I never felt like I belonged anywhere until I came here. Tracy took his hand, the years of pain melting into a single moment of fragile understanding. You're a Quartermain, she whispered. Whether the family likes it or not. Ronnie smiled faintly through his tears. I don't want anything from you. I just wanted to know my mother. Tracy let out a shaky breath. Well, now you do. And you'll probably regret it. He chuckled softly. I doubt that. Outside the room, Brooklyn watched through the glass, relief flooding her expression. Ned joined her, shaking his head. Only our family could pull this off, a long-lost son showing up out of nowhere. Brooke smiled sadly. Yeah, but maybe this time it'll bring us closer instead of tearing us apart. Ned wasn't so sure, but for the first time in a long time, Tracy looked human. Vulnerable. Maybe this was exactly what she needed. By the next morning, word had spread throughout Port Charles. Everyone from Sunny Corinthos to Carly Spencer was buzzing about Tracy's secret child. At the Metro Court, the whispers were relentless. Did you hear? Tracy Quartermain's long-lost son showed up, Carly said to Nina over coffee. Nina smirked. That family never disappoints. Makes the rest of us look normal. Carly laughed softly. Normal's overrated. Back at General Hospital, Tracy was discharged, insisting she could manage. Ronnie walked her to the elevator. You sure you're okay? He asked. Tracy gave a small smile. Physically, yes. Emotionally, ask me next week. He grinned. Deal. As the elevator doors closed, she looked at him again, truly seeing him for the first time. You have your grandfather's stubbornness. Heaven help me. Ronnie laughed. Guess it runs in the family. Later that night, alone at the mansion, Tracy poured herself a glass of sherry and stared out the window. Her reflection looked older, wiser, and maybe a little softer. For decades, she'd built walls around herself to survive the pain of her past. But now, those walls were cracked. Ronnie's arrival had changed everything. And as much as she hated to admit it, part of her was grateful. Monica entered quietly, holding a small box. Edward kept this, she said, handing it over. Tracy opened it slowly. Inside was a faded baby photo, the son she thought she'd never see again. Her breath hitched. He kept this all these years? Monica nodded. Maybe he wasn't as heartless as we thought. Tracy smiled through tears. No, but he certainly had his way of showing it. When Ronnie returned later, Tracy met him with an unexpected warmth. You're staying for dinner, she said matter-of-factly. That's not a question. Ronnie smiled. Wouldn't dream of saying no. Brooklyn grinned from the doorway. Welcome to the madness, Ronnie. You're officially one of us now. As the family gathered around the table, laughter and cautious optimism filled the air. For the first time in years, Tracy didn't feel like she was guarding her heart. She was simply living, and maybe, just maybe, healing. Outside, the night sky shimmered over Port Charles, and somewhere in the distance, a storm was brewing. Because in this town, peace never lasts for long, and neither do secrets.